Learning to play the piano so that you are actually good at playing the piano takes quite a long time. And if you're anything like I was, you don't want to waste any time and you want to get as good as possible, as quick as possible. So in today's video, I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do if I was to start learning the piano all over again. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to walk you through how I would organize a practice session to learn as quickly as possible. So let's get into it. So if I was starting again, the first thing that I would do is sight read something every day. When I first started learning the piano, I did zero sight reading whatsoever. And as a result of that, I was actually really pretty terrible at reading music. And the reason for that is because most of the time that I spent learning by ear. And I was actually very good at making stuff up on the piano and also playing songs by ear. But my ability to read music quickly was actually really quite bad. And that was all the way through from when I started learning the piano until I was 18 years old, when a teacher said to me that he didn't care about my ability to sight read, he only cared about my ability to learn pieces of music quickly. And that was kind of interesting to me because I'd never really put two and two together and worked out that the whole point of sight reading is to be able to read stuff quickly, which sounds stupid, but then again, I am stupid. So then I decided that I was actually going to spend some time really focusing on getting better at sight reading music. And so I got a load of secondhand music, and it was a stack about this size. And every day I would read through one new piece of music that I'd never seen before and only play it once. Because the whole point of sight reading is that you're trying to instantly recognize notes, instantly recognize patterns, and be able to read it instantly. And the whole purpose of me doing this was not actually to get good at sight reading. It was me trying to get good at recognizing things on the page quickly so that I could learn pieces of music quicker. So if I was to start learning the piano again, then I would sight read something every day. Because although sight reading is pretty painful, and in the moment it feels like you're just failing all the time, if I had got into the habit of sight reading music every day, then I would have been very good at reading music much earlier, and I would have worked my way through a lot more pieces and got better at the piano much faster. Another thing that I would do is focus on playing correctly. Now, once again, this sounds kind of stupid, and once again, that is because I am stupid. So I often need the obvious pointing out. But when I first started playing the piano, I didn't really care about how I was playing the notes or what I was actually playing. I just wanted to be able to play the piece of music as fast as I could. But as I got better at the piano, I realized that a problem that I solve now is a problem that I don't need to solve later. So if I play through a piece of music now and I find something that's challenging, or I find something that I'm getting wrong, then I immediately focus on that specific thing, because if I fix that now, then if it comes up again in another piece or later in that piece of music, then I've already solved the problem. Whereas when I first started learning, I would play through a piece of music from start to finish, make lots of mistakes, and then if I came across those problems in another piece, they would still be there and I'd still be making those mistakes. And if you play the same mistake lots of times, then you're just reinforcing that mistake rather than reinforcing the correct thing. Another thing that I would do if I was starting again is I would categorize the problems that I have into 3 categories. The first category is technical problems, the second category is musical problems, and the third category is knowledge problems. Now, knowledge problems are pretty easy to fix because all you have to do is learn the thing. So, for example, if you see an Italian word in a piece of music, then learn what that Italian word means. Although you'd be surprised how many people don't know the words that are in the piece of music that they're learning because they've never thought to look it up. Fixing musical problems is things like fixing dynamics, so how loud you're playing, or fixing articulation, so is something really short and spiky and staccato, or are you supposed to connect all the notes? Those kind of musical problems that characterize a piece of music, I would fix by isolating the section that has that musical problem. For example, if there is 4 bars where I'm forgetting to play quietly and I'm supposed to be playing quietly, I would only play those 4 bars over and over again quietly. So I'm reinforcing the dynamic that I'm supposed to be playing, and when playing through that piece, it happens automatically. And the same if there is a staccato section in a piece of music where all of the notes are short and spiky, I would isolate that section and make sure that they're really staccato, so that once again, when it comes to playing that piece through, you do it automatically. And then there are technical problems, which are problems where your hands just won't do what you want them to do. Technical problems tend to take more than one practice session to fix because you're trying to get your hand to do something new that it's not used to. And if you categorize your problems and know that the problem that you're having is a technical problem, then it becomes much easier to rationalize and fix. And there's a couple of ways that I would fix technical problems depending on on what that problem is. For example, if you have a series of really fast notes that your hands are struggling to play, you can play a long series of fast notes slowly so that your hand gets used to where it's got to go, or you can play really small sections of those fast notes quickly so that you get used to playing it at the speed it's supposed to be at. Or you might have something like a really difficult jump in a piece of music, and to fix that, I would isolate the problem and just do the jump. And then when you are comfortable with that, you can run into the jump and stop one note after the jump. But one of the best ways to fix technical problems is to create your own exercises out of that problem. For example, if you find a difficult jump in a piece like that, then you could turn that into an exercise by playing it through scales. This will mean that you not only fix the problem in that context, but you also get better at that skill in general. So if you come across jumps in another piece, your hands will be much more equipped to deal with it. Another thing that I would do if I was starting over again is to set clearly defined short-term goals. Most people know when they start learning the piano that they want to learn the piano.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
But unless you are doing grades, you don't often have something that's in the near future to aim towards. When I was learning the piano, the first grade that I actually did was grade 8. And this meant from starting the piano all the way up to being pretty good at the piano, I didn't have anything really to aim towards. And that can work for people who have the mental strength of a lion like I do. But for most people, learning the piano can become very daunting very quickly when you realize you've got a long way to go if you've got nothing in the short term to aim towards. So if you are someone who is playing without doing grades or anything like that, then a good idea is to try and perform to at least one person, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and prepare a handful of pieces to perform. Another good way of having things to prepare for is maybe starting a YouTube channel and playing a series of pieces for a video, or posting your performances in a learner piano group. A short-term goal can be whatever you want it to be, but for me, I definitely would have benefited from having deadlines where on a date I have to have learnt pieces of music by. Another thing that I would have learnt to do if I was starting all over again is to learn how to identify chords in a piece of music. Now, because I started learning the piano by playing by ear and understanding chords was something that I was pretty good at, it never crossed my mind when learning a piece of music by reading it that piece of music was also made up of chords and melodies, which sounds pretty stupid, but that's because I am pretty stupid. The interesting thing about chords in a piece of music is that most of what you are looking at are notes that form chords. Even if you aren't playing chords directly together like this, where you have 3 notes at the same time, you might see a piece of music that is something like this. And all of those notes together form a chord. Being able to understand chords in a piece of written music not only helps you understand what you are playing in terms of how it feels. Is it a major chord? Is it a minor chord? What does that tell you about the piece of music? But it also actually makes reading the piece of music a lot easier. Sight reading and reading pieces of music is not just about reading individual notes. If you can see larger patterns, and most of those patterns are chords, then you can start to read groups of notes rather than individual notes, and also you can predict what's going to happen next in the music because there are certain chord patterns that happen in all types of music. And another thing that I would do if I was starting over again, and this is something that I actually did do, but I would include anyway because it was the most beneficial thing for me, and that is to make time for messing around on the piano. This kind of depends on what type of player you are. There are people who only mess around on the piano, and there are people who never mess around on the piano. And what I mean by messing around is just playing for fun and playing without music, playing without any real intention, but just to find chords that you like the sound of and improvise with them, or work a song out by ear and mess about on the piano with the chords that you've worked out. If you want to really be able to understand music, there is no real better way than just messing around with the instrument. It's a bit like if you were trying to learn a different language. You can learn the individual words and you can piece sentences together. But the only way that you really get to know that language so that you are fluent in the language is by having an improvised conversation with someone else. So if I was starting again, while most of my practice would be your standard reading, learning pieces, that kind of thing, I would always make time for just messing around on the instrument because that is fun. It's going to help you be able to play with other people, and it's going to teach you more about chords and scales than anything else. So how would I actually organize a practice session if I was going to start from scratch today? Well, I would divide practice into 3 sections. I would have scales and technical exercises, I would have sight reading, and then I would have pieces. And I would mess around on the piano in between practice sessions. Scales and technical exercises are the best way of helping you improve your technique generally and your understanding of how scales work.
That would seem to be self-evident.
So when you are playing a piece of music that uses a certain scale, then your hands are very accustomed to which notes you're going to be using on the piano. And they're also a really good way of warming up because they really get your fingers to move before you have to play something that's a bit more mentally demanding. I would also include here any technical exercises that you've made up from problems that appear in your pieces. Because building technique in your fingers takes a bit of time, practicing these as kind of a warm-up means that you're isolating it from the piece of music that you're learning. And it means over several days you can get good at that technique without getting frustrated that it's not working when you play it in the piece. Then I would spend 20% of my time doing sight reading, and I would just try and find some random super easy music and play through it. If you are an absolute beginner, I would recommend my sight reading book, which there is a link to in the description. It has 420 exercises where you can just play through them one by one. Or you can just find any super easy music and just play through it only once. In sight reading, mistakes aren't really the issue as long as you keep going. The more sight reading you do, the more you'll notice a similar mistake come up. For example, if you are struggling to read jumps between two distant notes. Eventually, with enough sight reading practice, it will click. But going back and fixing problems means that you're not really sight reading anymore. So I would find some super easy music, play through it once, and then I would move on to pieces. And the reason that I would spend most time learning pieces is because not only is that the place to practice musicality, but you are also applying your ability to sight read and your ability to play scales all in one thing. And learning pieces can be divided into two different sections. Firstly, learning new notes, and secondly, fixing old notes. I would personally start by learning new notes because if you start playing through the piece of music that you can already play, you can get stuck in only fixing problems in a section that you already know. And it's worthwhile dedicating a bit of time to learning a new part of the piece. And then when it comes to fixing old notes, notes that you can already play in that piece of music, I would play through that section once and try and make notes of any problems and work out whether that is a knowledge problem, a musicality problem, or a technique problem. If it's a knowledge problem, then look it up. If it's a musicality problem, then isolate the section and practice that specific musicality problem. And if it's a technical problem, then turn it into an exercise, or isolate the problem so that you are playing a small amount of notes quickly or a larger amount of notes slowly, depending on what the problem is. So that is what I would do if I started learning the piano all over again. If you want to see how well my subscribers play the piano, then head on through and I will see you there.